Yes, so please, Monsignor Sorondo, and then I cannot see your name, I'm sorry. Okay, please go ahead. Yes.
What is your impression about the consequence of the Brexit for the European countries, of the point of view, also economic? And also in your institution, collaborative democracy, I think it's very important, this question.
Can I collect the second question?
Sure. I think this was a really great speech, and in terms of the top-down issues that your organization is probably less involved with because of the bottom-up work. But I'm wondering, when you just look and scan the political economic environment, where do you see the potential alliances that can bring about this more systemic shift to the core of political economy in terms of ownership structures, and who does our socioeconomic system really serve? Thank you.
And if you allow me, I also have Esther.
So my question is about work as the center of community and workplace. And how do you read the developments, for example, of Google establishing a campus where workers live and work? In fact, people start calling themselves Googlers. They have their own shops, their own entertainment. Is that a good thing for community, or is that a bad thing for community? Just your take on that.
Please go ahead.
Wow. So there's a lot to cover there, and I'll try and do it really quickly because I think we can also have a really rich general discussion. On Brexit, I have to say, I think there's been a lot of hand-wringing and willful misunderstanding of part of the basic impulse of Brexit that leaves us in danger of not actually being able to offer solutions and of being continually outflanked by the populist right, which is a real danger. I think part of the conversation that we need to be grappling with when we're talking about the European economic model is the fact that baked into its very foundations are the free movement of capital, goods and services, which we actually need to think about in a different way. For me, a lot of the explanation for what's been going on is a sort of rerun of what Polanyi talked about in terms of the disembedding of the economy from society and from nature. And that we need to re-embed that economy. And that actually requires, in particular, I think, thinking about the free movement of capital. I'd much rather have had an argument and a fight politically in the UK about free capital movement rather than being outmaneuvered on migration and playing into the hands of the xenophobes. And until we're prepared to go that deep, I think, into what actually happened, we'll be operating at a superficial level of dismissing it as racism, reactionary sort of impulses, culture war, all the traps that I think are set for us, rather than going to actually the real lived experience of those deindustrialized communities that, yes, we're receiving European funding and support, but frankly, actually want to be able to stand on their own feet and have healthy jobs and industries. And until we get to that, I think we're going to be talking past each other on Brexit. I know my views on Brexit are controversial. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that. On alliances, certainly, who does the current economy serve? The outcomes that we've seen consistently over 4 decades are no accident. Basically, the deep institutional relationships and the institutions at the heart of the economy at the moment are designed to produce the outcomes that they currently produce in terms of funneling wealth upwards. And we see this through privatization, through outsourcing, through the increasing leaching from the public sector of private extraction. And so I think there are some interesting alliances to be had with what you might call productive capital rather than financial capital. We found this in the work on the ground in communities like Cleveland, Ohio, once a proud industrial community. At one point, 50 of the 100 millionaires in the United States lived there. But basically, disinvestment, trade liberalization, capital flight, the loss of 40% of the population left Cleveland in a situation that was sort of second only to Detroit in terms of economic devastation. But there's still civic pride there, the amazing buildings, and the rooted institutions are still there. The Cleveland Clinic isn't going to move. Its name is the Cleveland Clinic. It's always going to be in Cleveland. University hospitals, Case Western Reserve University. There was still, these very powerful anchors to work with, and the local business community can get on board with versions of what we're talking about here. You can call this in some ways market socialism. In other ways, it's economic common sense and civic pride and rebuilding a local economy in which there's a plurality of different business forms and ownership. So I actually think there's a lot of promise in building broad alliances around the common sense of this approach. Well, Esther, we know about company towns from history. I think it's a woeful development. In many ways, we talk about a market economy, but increasingly we're dealing with a planned economy, an economy that's planned by central banks, but that's also planned by large corporations within which most international trade takes place. These aren't markets. These are planning systems, but they're just not democratic planning systems. And then if you layer in the inordinate power that comes from these gigantic economic institutions. And for example, the bidding war that took place over the Amazon headquarters, where essentially any benefits that the community might receive are already given away in advance through subsidies and this sort of race to the bottom of deregulation. We're seeing it now with free ports in the UK, these sort of export processing zones and so on. And so I think what we actually need is a much more diverse, rooted ecosystem of economic activity, not reliance on what are essentially the opposite of anchor institutions. They may be there and be very dominant for a while, but just wait until there's a better offer from somewhere else. And then the rug is pulled out from under the community and we throw away cities, literally, and think not just of the capital costs of that, but think also of the human costs, but the carbon costs of all the infrastructure that's then built that then isn't utilized because of corporate locational decisions. So I think capital is this incredibly powerful thing. It's like a floating electric charge. It needs to be earthed, and we can earth it through different means of ownership and through different ways in which we relate private business activity to the public good through the local public sector in the way I've been talking about. Looking forward to the general discussion.
Thank you, Joe. So indeed, yes, like